All right, let's jump right into this explainer. If you've ever caught yourself wondering where our baseline sense of right and wrong actually comes from, well, natural law ethics offers a really compelling, deeply historical answer to that. We're talking about a major theological tradition that traces its roots all the way back to ancient Greece, eventually championed by thinkers like Thomas Aquinas. It basically acts as a moral blueprint for human behavior. So today, we're going to break down this whole intricate framework. To kick things off, we really have to ask a fundamental question. When we look at man-made stuff, say a clock or a ship, we inherently know they were built with a very specific job in mind. But what about us? Do human beings actually have an intended design plan? Well, natural law ethics hinges entirely on the premise that yes, we absolutely do. Here's our agenda for today. First, we'll look at the concept of telos. Second, Aquinas and the four laws. Third, how our reasoning warps. Fourth, replying to the critics. And finally, the limits of natural law. Okay, Section 1, the concept of telos. Right at the very center of this entire framework is the Greek word telos. Put simply, it means a purpose, an aim, or a function. And natural law theorists argue that telos applies directly to us as humans. In Christian theology, the idea here is that God designed human beings, literally down to our specific organs, to serve particular purposes. So the thinking goes, by examining our design, we can essentially read our own moral instruction manual. And here's how those laws actually play out. On one hand, we have descriptive laws. These are the rules that govern the physical universe, like gravity or thermodynamics. They just describe how nature works, right? But then we have prescriptive laws. These are the moral truths that prescribe how we should act. The theory argues that when we follow these natural moral prescriptions, things generally go pretty well for us. But when we deviate, we violate our telos, and, well, painful consequences usually follow. But that brings up a good question. How do we actually know these rules without just looking them up in a textbook? The theory suggests that as rational beings, our minds are naturally attuned to these laws. This idea actually traces all the way back to the biblical passage Romans 2, which argues that we have this innate sense of right and wrong that is, metaphorically speaking, written directly on our hearts. Moving right along to Section 2, Aquinas and four laws. So how do we organize all these rules? Thomas Aquinas completely breaks this down into four distinct levels, which is super helpful. At the very top, you've got eternal law. These are God's overarching decrees that govern the entire universe. Right below that sits natural law. That's the specific chunk of eternal law that we can figure out just using human reason. Next is divine law, which is expressed in Scripture to cover the things we couldn't just reason out on our own. And finally, at the bottom, we have human law. Think of your everyday traffic rules or speed limits. They're basically practical applications created by society to preserve life. Now, if we zoom in on natural law specifically, contemporary theorists point out that we possess what they call primary precepts. These are foundational moral principles that are just so deeply hardwired into our design that anyone with basic cognitive function simply can't not know them. The absolute most basic examples: pursue good, avoid evil, and love your neighbor. And from those core ideas, we derive secondary precepts, like the rule that we shouldn't lie or that we should give back what belongs to somebody else. Which leads us to Section 3, how our reasoning warps. Here's the catch. If we all have this built-in moral compass, why do we fail so frequently? Well, Aquinas is pretty upfront about this. Our rationality is fragile. First off, strong passions, like intense anger, can easily blind us to justice. Second, evil habits, like the repeated viewing of pornography, for example, can deeply distort our sense of sexual morality. Third, we have evil dispositions, like a genetic predisposition to alcoholism. Fourth is vicious custom. If you live in a society that actively celebrates bribery, your moral compass is going to adjust to that skewed true north. And finally, evil persuasion, which is when clever but totally flawed arguments convince us that bad behavior is actually okay. All right, Section 4, replying to the critics. Now, critics of this theory raise a massive, highly practical objection here. If natural law is truly universal and supposedly written on everyone's heart, how on earth do we explain sociopaths? How do we explain people who don't just ignore these primary precepts, but actively champion horrific acts like mass murder or rape? Doesn't their very existence just totally dismantle the whole theory? Theorist Jay Bachensky steps in to counter this, and his reply is actually fascinating. He argues that it is entirely possible to know things that we don't know we know. Think about the basic laws of logic. You probably use the law of non-contradiction every single day without ever knowing its official philosophical name, right? Well, Buczynski argues the exact same thing applies to morality. People who commit heinous acts might genuinely know the natural law deep down, but they either tacitly deny it or they actively suppress that knowledge just because they don't want to deal with it. Another super common objection is the idea that society is always evolving and inventing brand new values, which would imply morality is just a human construct, not a natural law at all. But Buczynski pushes back hard on this. He replies that inventing a genuinely new, true moral value is as logically impossible as inventing a brand new primary color. It might sound incredibly persuasive when someone claims they've discovered a new value, but Buczynski argues we're really just slapping a shiny new, modern label onto an old, well-known foundational truth. And finally, Section 5, Limits of Natural Law. Now, despite all these incredible insights, we have to admit the blueprint has some actual practical flaws. The most glaring limit is that the theory really struggles to give us concrete guidance on highly complex modern dilemmas. For instance, it offers almost zero help on distributive justice, like exactly how resources and goods should be fairly shared in an economy. Similarly, natural law doesn't give a clear-cut answer on civic questions, like whether recreational drugs should be legalized in a pluralistic society. It paints with very broad strokes right where we actually need fine details. On top of that, a really persistent challenge for the framework is figuring out whether certain actions actually fulfill or violate our telos. Critics point out a massive logical fallacy that people fall into all the time: the assumption that just because something is biologically unnatural, it must automatically be immoral. And there's a wonderfully absurd but totally vital point to illustrate this. Look, the biological tongue was certainly not made to lick postage stamps. That is absolutely not its natural telos. But it would be completely ridiculous to claim that using your tongue for that unnatural purpose is therefore immoral, right? So, by extension, we have to be incredibly careful about trying to strictly read moral appropriateness directly off of our bodily functions. So, I'm going to leave you with this to think about. Natural law ethics offers this profoundly rich historical framework for understanding our innate sense of right and wrong. But if the physical limits of our biology don't strictly define the absolute limits of our morality, like that postage stamp example perfectly shows, how can we ever perfectly and definitively read the natural laws written on our hearts? It's a completely captivating puzzle, and honestly, it's exactly why philosophers are still debating this to this very day. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and keep questioning the blueprint.